I got asked an interesting question. Why? How come I think Eddie Murphy and Tom Cruise never made a movie together? That's interesting. Eddie didn't work with a lot of people. I always wonder how come him and Spike Lee, because I know in Black World people don't work together in the game. I understand that. And then in Pop White World, it's for different reasons as well. But what could they have possibly have done together? Could have made Eddie Murphy and Tom Cruise work together. It's interesting because what would have been the happy medium? What would it could it have been? Could they have done anything? I'm thinking about their catalogs retrospectively. What could they have done? What would it have been like if they had have done something together? And what era would it have been? You know, um, it's kind of hard to say. When you think about two actors, their careers are like different, but there's similarities. I mean, obviously the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, and you think about the Mission Impossible, there's a lot of action, a lot of suspense, a lot of totality. You know, um, there's a hustle, there's a charm to it. They both charismatic. So why it never came to be? It's a lot of different reasons. I think the audiences may not accept each other. Would it been something if you had seen it? Could you have had like an Ebony and Ivory of Eddie Murphy and Tom Cruise? Because think about it. They were two of the biggest actors 40 years ago, and they still making movies today. Now, obviously, Eddie ain't the kingpin he once was, but he still has had success in the film game. And then, of course, you ask yourself, is Tom Cruise more closer to Eddie, or is he more closer to Will Smith in styles of films? That's an interesting discussion in its own right. Um, because there's more similarity with him and Will, but he came out the same time as Eddie. And it's just kind of interesting that when you think about certain paths that haven't crossed when they hybrid and put people together, it's just kind of like one of those things. Like it's like, wow, could there have been a missed opportunity? When you put people together and co-star, how that might have worked. Um, Imagine if you had a reboot of Trading Places now, and you had Eddie and Tom Cruise, and in a way that you couldn't imagine it. You know, balance it out. Could it work? Could it make sense? Interesting though. I'm just always kind of wondering about how paths don't cross, and you know, uh, projects. So two of the biggest ones, because think about it, they're two of the survivors of that era that were kids back then. Basically, I mean, let's keep it 100. You go back 40 years ago, Eddie was still a puppy in his early 20s. Tom Cruise was still a puppy in his early 20s. And then you think about, they went in different directions in the 90s because Eddie did more animation, different things on his voices, but he was still big though. The Nutty Professor, all that stuff was big. He still was making bank, and he actually was more prolific and productive, you know. And he just dropped Beverly Hills Cop 4 or 44. I don't know which one. It's one of them things. But anyway, it's interesting that looking at how two successful careers, and neither one of them won no Oscar, but were box office royalty. So they defied the logic and the proof. And what is it? It was harder to be a pinup actor from the 80s or a comedian and still having box office clout. I think that's interesting. That's why I think that they have two interesting stories that would be compelling if there ever was a movie if you sat down and talked about, because people always kind of downplayed them both as actors, but yet they still have careers as we speak, still have left a lasting impact, and definitely two of the most important actors of their generation. So interesting, they never worked together on a project. Just that's a good question that was brought up, and so that's how I'm trying to fill in. If you want to comment more, feel free to load on the bottom. Please hit like, subscribe, welcome thoughts, comments, and I do respond. Thank you. Wash your hands, keep your mind clear, watch out for another. Share it if you like. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out one time. Peace.